The whole reason I wanted this bike rack, other than getting the bikes out of the inside of the car, is because it tilts down. Cotter pin. Hitch bolt with locking washer. 3/4 inch socket. Today I'm going to talk about our experience over the last week using the Swagman XTC2 tilting bike rack. This bike rack is a pretty good budget option, coming in at under $200 on Amazon. And by the way, Swagman and nobody else sponsored this video in any way. I purchased these with our own funds. We drove over 800 miles this past week from Chicago up to northern Michigan and back, and we probably took the bikes on and off about 10 times at least. And over that time, we really didn't have any major issues, except for one, which I'll get to in a second. I think this rack is a great option if you're an occasional user, maybe use it 3 to 6 times a year. If you're serious and go out every weekend with your bikes, you might want to look at something like a Thule or a Kuat, something a lot more expensive. The instructions want you to attach the entire bike rack assembly to this receiver hitch assembly, but I'm going to install this into the hitch receiver first. There's a threaded bolt, and they call it a 1/2 inch bolt, but it uses a 3/4 socket. And also you'll note this adapter, which allows you to use this bike rack with either a 2-inch hitch receiver like we have, or with an 1.25 inch receiver if you remove these plates. And now on the other side of that threaded bolt, I'll install this cotter pin. All right, before I attach the bike rack assembly, I want to point out 2 things on this hitch bar. First of all, you'll notice this bolt on the right is threaded, and it uses a smaller bolt than the other hole back here, which is not threaded. Slide this on. And now I've moved the camera around to the other side, and I'm ready to put in this bolt, except it requires that this strap for this linch pin also be attached to the bolt. So we're going to slide this through. This is a 12mm bolt, but it uses a 19mm socket nut. Are these called socket nuts? Huh. Back around on the other side, we'll install this standard flat washer, then this locking washer, and then this nut. And to make things a little easier, I'm going to tilt down the bike rack. It's going to be easier to tighten this if you have an extra wrench in addition to your socket. All right, the problem is that I want this hanging down, but it's really hard to hold it in place while you're also tightening the bolt, and it wants to move with the bolt, so I'm just going to keep trying. All right, I think that's a little better. And now I'm going to lift up the bike rack, and there's this 8mm bolt. You have to insert it from this side. And this gets tightened with this, no it doesn't. This gets tightened with the larger Allen wrench. Around here on the other side, you can see the bolt protrudes just a little bit, but you don't put a nut on this end. It just sits in there. And I wonder if that bolt is going to need to be occasionally tightened over time. And this linch pin is the whole reason that we bought this particular bike rack. The linch pin is used to secure the tilting rack in position so that it doesn't tilt. All right, now we can pull out these pins and fold down the racks. The center post can also be swung down if necessary. Next, we'll put on the 2 hooks that hold the bikes down, and I'm going to put the short one facing back, because I think our folding bike is going to go there, and then I'm going to put the longer one on top, facing out. I'll make sure that these pins are back in place to secure the sidearms. Now I'll attach the 4 wheel holders. The curve here should be on the top, so not upside down. What am I doing wrong? Try it over here. Okay. And you'll notice that these alternate which side the center post is on. All right, this side is just tighter. There we go. So we'll just leave these loosely fit until we actually put the bikes on. And the last little bit is that there are these 2 apparently self-taping screws. I think they mean tapping. And these screws fit in at the bottom of these bars in order to keep the wheel holders from sliding off. To make this easier to install, I'm going to lift this up so that I can better see what I'm doing. Leverage is also a lot better if you do this. All right, it is self-tapping. And I'll do the other side. Just give it a little push to drive it through the plastic. Now, the bar is metal. It's this plastic cap that extends down. That's what you're actually screwing into. And it's at this point that you would actually attach the bike rack to the hitch assembly, according to the instructions, but I started with the hitch assembly already attached to the car, which I think makes it a lot easier to put this all together. All right, I have bikes. The first one I'm going to install is my folding bike. Let me get this secure. And I also want to point out that both of our bikes have these collapsible folding pedals, which I think will make them ideal for transporting like this. They're not going to ride against each other. You know what? I just had one of those feelings that you get sometimes. I think I'm going to put the larger bike on the inside and the smaller bike on the outside, because I think then maybe it will draft better aerodynamically. I think it'll look better too. Let's see. And in order for this to work, I need to reverse the 2 hooks. So now I've got the shorter hook on the outside, and that will hold my folding bike. And then I've got a longer hook on the inside to hold the larger bike. I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't stick out too far on one side or the other. Bring that down temporarily. This is tricky. So the first time you do this, you're going to have to play with the placement of these hooks. I need to either reverse them or have the shorter hook on top. All right, I figured it out. This is what I did. The main change I just made was to put the shorter hook on the outside so that it's holding the folding bike, and I placed it below the long hook on the center post. So here's the long hook, and it's holding the larger bike at the back. And now that the wheel holders are set where I want them, I can actually tighten them down. All right, now these hooks that hold down the bikes, they actually ratchet. There's a thread there on each corner of the post. And so when you slide them down, they ratchet in place. I think I can do it to the lower one. Next, I'm going to secure these wheel straps. All right, so the whole reason I wanted this bike rack, other than getting the bikes out of the inside of the car, is because it tilts down. So let's find out if it tilts down enough for the hatch on our Jeep to operate. I'm going to release that pin from earlier. Tilts down. Pretty nice. Now, whoa, there's a good 10, 12 inches of clearance there. Awesome. You've got all this space here. You just have to step over there. But, you know, the other rack was so in the way, even without the bikes on it. This is just going to be a lot easier. So after a week of using this bike rack, here are a couple things we found that we don't like. As you drive down the road and it moves back and forth, this gets tighter and tighter, I've found. When you reach your destination, you may find that it is next to impossible to press this button in with finger pressure alone. That was actually pretty good. My suggestion is that you have a tool like a crescent wrench or a screwdriver and use that to press in that button, and then it's easier to raise the latching mechanism. The next thing, which is a little hard to see in this video, is that the left side, the driver's side, is always lower than the right side. Even if you try to correct it, it's just built into the manufacturing, or at least it's a fault with this particular unit. And that's the case regardless of whether there are bikes on it or not. One of the main things that still concerns me about this rack is the amount of rotational movement. When you're going down a bumpy road, it moves around a lot. On the highway, it's not an issue at all, but it's just something to keep in mind, and you might want to be tightening these bolts on a regular basis just to make sure everything is still secure. One positive thing while I'm thinking of it is that there's been absolutely no rattle here at the hitch receiver. Even though there's a fair amount of movement in it, it doesn't rattle while you're driving, and we haven't heard any noises going down the road. Without question, the best thing about this bike rack is that it tilts down. It's made it really handy to access the hatch and to load things in and out. I can even put in a third folding bike with ease, with relative ease. So while I'm putting the license plate back on, this is a good time to point out that you can't see the license plate with the bike rack in place. Some state troopers might take more of an issue with that than others. If you're really concerned about the license plate being visible, you can probably bungee cord it somehow to this section. And I believe online you can find license plate holders that are specifically designed for trailers that you can attach to the back of a bike rack like this. In my previous video, I talked about the Swagman XTC, which is a non-tilting model that I bought by mistake. But be sure to check out that video if you want a simple rack to attach to the back of an RV or to the bumper of a travel trailer, because it's RV approved. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thanks!